us have heard gripping tales of disaster and hardship that led the victims of the tragedy to overcome and turn their struggle into success. But how many of us today can say, given the same circumstances, that we too would transcend and turn our tragedy into triumph? Today I'm here to tell you a story of a man who gives hope to everyone being confronted with adversity. A man whose courage and resolute character in the midst of terror and loss is inspiring. His story will motivate you to believe that no circumstance is too insurmountable to overcome. It was a sunny Monday morning, or Monday afternoon I should say, on August 21st, 1995 in Atlanta, Georgia. A man named Alan was taking a noon flight to Gulfport, Mississippi for business. Normally he would have flown out early in the morning, but on this particular day it was the area's first day of school, so he decided to save himself the trouble and avoid the traffic and take a noon flight out. Atlantic Southeast Airlines Flight 529 left on time that day. It was to be a short flight with hardly enough time for the flight attendant to make their rounds for drinks and snacks. About 20 minutes after departing, what happened next is every flyer's worst nightmare. A left engine propeller blade unexpectedly tore off. Now I'll read to you from the National Transportation Safety Board's Air Traffic Accident Report on the incident. The flight crew declared an emergency landing and initially attempted to return to Atlanta. They then advised air traffic control that they were not able to maintain altitude and were vectored toward another airport for an emergency landing. The airplane continued its descent, passed through some trees, and was destroyed by impact forces with the ground in post-crash fire. Imagine that. The plane was destroyed by impact forces with the ground and post-crash fire. If that's not terrifying, I don't know what is. Of the 29 passengers and crew on board that day, 10 people died from injuries sustained in the crash. Alan was among the survivors. In an interview conducted with him last month, he recalls the pain of the people, the luggage, and the seats of the left side of the plane breaking loose and falling on top of him. In a heroic effort, he was able to set himself free, but he remembers pulling the burning clothes off of 2 people who were on fire, who both later died. He broke 2 ribs, he separated both shoulders, he had 2nd and 3rd degree burns on his right hand, and he lost much of the skin and fingerprints on that hand. And he was going to have to live with the horrific images of this disturbing event for the rest of his life. Now, no one asks for tragedy, that's obvious, but would you think I was crazy if I told you to embrace the struggles that life presents to you and realize that it actually benefits you? A 2010 study conducted by the University of Buffalo stated that adverse life events actually positively affect mental health. It helps foster resilience and it creates advantages for your own well-being. Steve Bloom's August 22nd, 2011 article entitled "Do Great Lives Require Hardship?" requires that just experiencing these high levels of adversity isn't what creates the advantage. It's the choices that you make after you endure the struggle that help determine how far you're going to get in life. The character that you build through learning to cope well with trials is the benefit. Anyone can easily collapse under the pressure of adversity, but it's those of us who rise above these punishing circumstances that become iconic leaders and inspirations. You don't simply build character through overcoming trying circumstances, but you develop your own life story and you experience what makes you unique. Your struggles become your strengths and your strengths become your story, and to me that's beautiful. So how did Alan deal with his adversity? An Atlanta journalist named Gary Pomerantz wrote a book about the crash entitled 9 minutes 20 seconds. That's the time between when the propeller broke off and the plane actually crashed. In a recent round of printing, he re-interviewed the survivors to get an update on how they're doing since the event. Gary noted that Alan is the only passenger today that doesn't still think about the crash every single day. Almost 2 decades since the event, he's the only one who doesn't still think about it. He is the only man who is mentally and emotionally stable enough to still hold a full-time job. He is the only survivor who didn't quit their job, uproot their family, move them someplace else, or divorce their spouse for a fresh start. He's the only one who didn't make a major life decision based off the residual effects of the incident. But how did he do it while so many others were not able to do it? For instance, let me tell you about the flight attendant, Robin Feck. She also survived. She went back to work for the airline, but she was simply doing filing work for them in their offices. But their office was in the airport. Simply the sound of planes taking off and landing, the smell of fuel at times, was too much for her to overcome. She was not able to turn her tragedy into triumph the way Alan did. And to this day, 17 years since the event, she has not gotten back on a plane and flown again. Gary Pomerantz says the reason that Alan has made such strides and has overcome his struggle far more than the other passengers is because he released the pain of the event by seeking help and talking about it. Although the memory of men and women on fire will always haunt him, he speaks openly about it. And just 1 month after the crash, he spoke to a church about his testimony of how God saved him that August day. Since, he has formally spoken almost 70 times about the event. He was interviewed for 2020, The Today Show, 700 Club, American Journal, Sean Hannity's show, the Sally Jesse Raphael show, and even for People magazine, among many others. Even more miraculously, just 5 months after this crash, he got back on a plane and he flew again. And today he's flown hundreds and hundreds of times since. Alan also credits his success since the crash to faith. He says, peace of mind that God gives him doesn't put him in a state of crisis at the thought of death. And because of this, he didn't buckle under the pressure of adversity. He embraced the suffering as an opportunity to make more of himself. He didn't use his struggle as a crutch or an excuse for why he couldn't make something of himself, but rather as an incentive to do better, to be better. Remember that despite your hardships, there's still so much to be grateful for. Chances are you probably still have legs that carry you, and eyes that see the world around you, and lungs that breathe. And you have a mind that permits you to make a decision to be courageous in the face of adversity. You have a mind that lets you choose how you're going to react to adversity. So I ask you, would you rather be Alan or Robin in your time of struggle? To close, I ask, how would you respond to this adversity? I hope and pray that none of you are going to have to experience something like a plane crash to see who you are when your character is tested. But I'm telling you, nothing is too insurmountable to overcome. I mentioned that Alan had third-degree burns on his right hand. The doctors told him shortly after the crash that maybe one day he might be able to regain partial use of his hand. But today, not only does he use his hand perfectly, like nothing ever happened, but there's not even scars on his hand to tell a story. He didn't give up. He remembered that he still had a family that loved him, and he had legs that carried him, and he had so much left to live for. Talk about your pain and your hardships. Don't be afraid to discuss your problems and open up to people who can relate and help you. If you're a person of faith, remember that hope is close by. This courageous passenger's determination astounds me, and it makes me want to be better. And I hope that his story has inspired you too, because this man means more to me than anything, because he is my father. Thank you.